Video, I will be covering the distributive property and also teaching you or reviewing with you how to multiply binomials. So feel free to hit the space bar to pause at any time. Make sure you are copying all these notes as I will be working through quite a few of the delta math problems in this video. So first of all, the distributive property involves distributing. And if you think about what it means to distribute, it means to share. Okay? So the property basically states that if you multiply a monomial times anything in parentheses, that you are ultimately going to share the multiplication of this a with each term in parentheses. So this would result in AB plus AC. So that's in general what it is saying. In terms of examples, if I were to say multiply 3x times the quantity x plus 5, and I say the word quantity because quantity describes that something is in parentheses. So we would read this as 3x times the quantity x plus 5. When I share, we have to remember our laws of exponents, which say that when we are multiplying an x times an x, we will add their exponents. So things to remember is that all variables and numbers have an exponent of an understood 1 if you do not see one. So when I multiply 3x times x, I get 3x to the second power, and that comes from adding the 1 and 1. When I multiply 3x times the 5, then I get a positive 15x. And therefore, I have completely distributed, okay? So another quick example, if I have a x to the third, and of course it doesn't have to be just two terms in the quantity, I could have 2x squared plus 5x minus 6. If I am distributing this x cubed to each term, then when I multiply x cubed times 2x squared, I would have 2x to the 3 plus 2 is 5. So remember that exponents represent repeated multiplication. So this would be like saying I have 3x's times 2 and 2x's plus 5 and an x minus 6. So think about this if it's bothering you, like how do I know when I multiply or add? So if I have 3x's times these 2x's, then that means I have 5x's total. So in other words, you can just count. And again, 3 and this 1 make 4. So again here, same thing as if I added the 3 plus 1. And then if I'm multiplying 3x's by a negative 6, remember positive times a negative is a negative. I need my coefficient of 6 first, then my 3x's, written as x cubed. So again, x cubed times negative 6 would be negative 6x cubed. So just wanted to remind you that the big thing is to remember that when multiplying variables, add their exponents. And just because I want to do one really quick with multiple variables, if I have negative 2xy to the third times 3 minus x squared y plus 2z, that when I multiply, of course, numbers get multiplied together. So when I multiply these terms, negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6, and then I just bring down my variables. A negative 2 times a negative, keep in mind, guys, there is an understood coefficient of 1 here. So a negative 2 times a negative 1 makes a positive 2. If I have x times x squared, that means I'm multiplying 3 x's together. And if I have y cubed times y to the first, I am multiplying 4 y's together. And then a negative 2 times a positive 2 is a negative 4. And sometimes we don't have anything to combine, but when we have multiple variables, we should put them in alphabetical order. So there's 3 examples just to remind you of the distributive property. I'm going to go ahead now and switch to Delta Math and just discuss a few. I do on the top of this assignment have 2 problems that are similar to yesterday's assignment on classifying polynomials. Just recall that an expression is a polynomial if all exponents are positive whole numbers. They have to be positive whole numbers or it does not represent a polynomial. So you've got 2 of those, and then also 2 where you name it specifically. So if you're looking at 3 and 4 and like, I don't understand this, please make sure you're looking at your notes from yesterday's lesson. So an expression represents a, remember, the name is based on the degree of the polynomial, and terms are separated by plus and minus signs. The constant term is always the number without a variable. The leading term is the term with the highest exponent. Oop, that's the highest exponent, so that whole thing would be the leading term. And the leading coefficient would be the number in front of the leading term, so that would be just the 2. Okay? So a couple of those just to practice. Also a couple of add and subtract. One thing I just want to mention is that when subtracting, don't forget to distribute this negative. Remember, distributing a subtraction sign switches the signs in the polynomial after it. Okay. All right. So now I'm just going to skip down here to 7 because the first 6 are review from yesterday, and we're just going to look at practicing these. One thing I just want to remind you of is you've got your watch help video, and you also have your show examples up here if you need those. But you are literally just going to share and remember to add your exponents. All problems, by the way, need to be written neatly in your notebook. Some of you are forgetting that when you take notes and the assignment says submit notes and work from the Delta Math assignment, some of you are only submitting notes. So that's going to get you a 50, assuming that you copied everything that was on paper. So please make sure that you are also writing down the problems. So for this one in particular, you should write down number 7. So that's what I'm going to do in my notebook. Write down number 7. And this one should be a relatively easy problem. So I'm going to flip back here to my document camera here, and then share. So negative 3x times 4, we can multiply the numbers together. So negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. We keep our x. A negative times a positive is negative. And a 3 times 2 is 6. And I'm multiplying 2 x's together, so I need to write that as x squared, keeping in mind that, remember, you're adding exponents here. Okay, so that's a pretty easy one. Don't forget that when you type it in Delta Math, negative 12x, you need to hit Shift and then the 6 key to make it an exponent if an exponent is needed. I don't need one for this term, so I'm just going to go on and hit minus 6x and then Shift 6 to type in the 2. If anything comes after that, you can either hit the down arrow or you can hit the right arrow in your navigation keys, your left, right, up, down keys, okay? Then make sure you submit it. And, of course, you're sharing those 2 terms together and finding the product of each term. All right? So I'm going to skip down here and do number 11. I think there was one that might have been a little tougher. Those aren't hard. That's an easy one as well. There really just aren't that many. It's pretty straightforward, distributive property. Let's do this one here, though. This is number 13 that I'm doing with you. So I'm going to copy 13 down in my notebook. And because this is part of your notes, you should see this problem worked out in your notebook. So 6x squared times negative 7x squared. Positive times a negative is negative. 6 times 7 is 42. And then how many x's do I have? X to what power? Kind of hard to mess that up, right? Because 2 plus 2 and 2 times 2 is 4. But remember that that's 2 x's being multiplied by 2 x's. So 4 total. Now, if you are the type that you want to write down more, like they showed you in the Delta Math example, you can. and then it's going to be a 6 plus a 6x squared times a negative 8x, and then plus a 6x squared times a positive 7. That's ultimately what we're doing. But you certainly don't have to do that. You can just show that you know you're sharing to each term. So my next term, positive 6 times negative 8 is negative 48. And how many x's do we have? We've got 2 here and 1 here. So a lot of times students will say, oh, there's 2 x's. Nope. X squared means there are already 2. So there's 2 here and 1 here, which makes x cubed. And then plus 42 x squared. So it is important to know your multiplication and your sign rules. So I'll just add that up here. A positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. And of course, a positive times a positive is a positive. All right, these are just multiplication sign rules. And that's 13. There's one more problem that I'd like to do, and it's when we do a one like 14 and 15. So I'm going to move to 14. And I'm copying it down in my notebook right now, and you should as well. So the reason I do the notes in the notebook, guys, is I'm doing it so that's exactly what I would expect you to do if, as a student at home. Just pull out a notebook, your math notebook, and continue to add to it. Always put the date and the topic, and then that way you have it to look back to when you are working your quiz and tests, okay? So I've copied this problem down. We always want to verify that we wrote everything down correctly. We don't want to be crowded in our work, so make sure it's spaced out. So this problem looks a little different. It looks like we've got negative 3 times this quantity in parentheses plus 7 times this quantity in parentheses. So this actually means we are going to distribute twice. So we're going to distribute first, then we're going to combine like terms like we did in yesterday's lesson. So negative 3 times s, we simply put them next to each other. Negative 3 times negative 10, a minus does mean that that number is negative. So negative 3 times negative 10 is positive 30. Plus, or actually I'm going to take that plus off because what's a positive times a negative? It's a negative, so that's going to turn into a minus 14s. And then 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. Then I'm going to identify any like terms like we did in yesterday's lesson. Remembering that if we are combining two negative numbers, we really just add and keep the sign. So that's negative 14 and 3 makes 17. But we can certainly use our calculator, so let me show you that as well. If you do not, we should not be using our basic iPhone calculator. We should have this Calc84 app downloaded if we have an iPhone, and we should have installed the Wabbit Emu app if we have an Android phone. If you need any help with those, please let us know. But again, the Calculate84 app is pink. It looks like this. Okay. So when I'm typing in negative 3 subtract 14, remember your negative button is down here by this decimal. So I would type in negative 3 subtract 14, and I get a negative 17. So negative 17s, and remember when we're just combining like terms, we're grouping together. We're not multiplying, so we don't do anything to the exponent. Now we have positive 30 subtract 7. Think about if you had $30 and you spend $7, you now have $23 left. Okay. So then we would just type that into Delta Math. All right, and 15 will be similar to that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and then do another short video on the multiplication. So if you would like to, at the conclusion of this video, go do all the problems from 1 through 15, then do that. So go ahead and finish 1 through 15, and then there will be another video right here in between to add to your notes on using the box method and also double distribution to multiply binomials.